All right, welcome back. This is going to be part 103 of my presentation on the flood and Noah's Ark. And guys, we've been looking at the animals that went on Noah's Ark on the past couple videos, and we still got a couple still to go. And before we're finished with this block here, but in the last video, and the one previous, we've been talking about kinds and species. And so it's really interesting whenever evolutionists are talking about species, they're talking correct about how animals, how kinds of animals can have varieties, of animals, and they call those species. And so now Darwin was under the impression that this takes a long period of time for that to happen. And he talked about those finches and how the ancestor the ancestor of all those 14, I believe it was 14 different varieties that they had. It took millions of years for that to happen. And though other studies, very recent, I believe one was 2017, said that can happen in as little as two generations, that you can have different species or different varieties of that finch. And so, and again, in just two generations, so that time period. And there's the argument of Stephen Jay Gould, where he had introduced punctuated equilibrium, where he didn't think that it took long periods of time, though that you can get different varieties to happen very quickly. And so I would agree with that. And so they called that punctuated equilibrium, where you have long periods of time, and then you have, boom, you just have this, in a short period of time, you can have a new variety or a new species being introduced. And so just like, look at all the dogs and cats in the world, all those different varieties of dogs and cats, and just came from just two cats that came off of Noah's Ark. And so it's just, when you look at the varieties of different animals and stuff, those would be what you would call species. Those would be called species. So anytime you hear species, you're thinking of varieties. And so now when Darwin wrote his book, The Origin of Species, it's very, guys, it's so, it's really a bait and switch that they use, because they a lot of times are talking about changes in species, but then they use the those examples to say that that's how a dinosaur became a bird, and so, which is false. They use microevolution, which is changes or varieties or changes in a kind, though it's the same kind, and they try to say that they use those examples for changing an animal into a completely different animal. And so it's a bait and switch. And so there's no evidence for macroevolution, an animal changing into another animal, but there is evidence for microevolution. So what they'll do is they'll use the microevolution in a lot of their writings and stuff. And what I showed you on the previous video with the mollusk and the finches, those are examples of microevolution. And so, but going on here, we're going to start talking about hybrids. And this is where two species, now remember, species is no more than just a variety of one kind of animal. And so, where species can come together and reproduce offspring. And so, they consider those hybrids. Now, can there be problems? Yes. And if I remember correctly, they consider that outbreeding depression, where you can keep breeding these animals to a certain limit, to where you start having problems, whether it's DNA or mutations or just even the size of the animal. The size of the animal, if you've got let's just say a dog, if you've got a little teeny tiny dog, a Chihuahua, you're never going to get that Chihuahua to breed with a Great Dane. And so I don't know if they could take some of the sperm and put it into a female Great Dane and see if it would actually take. And I don't see any problem with it. It would be a funny looking dog that would come out. But then again, you have those physical limitations, though, where they physically won't be able to mate to produce. And so, you may have limitations like that. And so, but there have been problems. There have been problems with hybrids, and I'm going to show you some examples of that, and we're going to talk about those. But it doesn't mean that they're two different kinds of animal, or the animal is changing into another animal. It's just meaning that there is mutation. There's a mutational rate that has accumulated in the animal, and it could be just you've got different types of dogs that have different types of issues. Like our dogs are Shih Tzus. We have two Shih Tzu dogs, and they cannot take the heat. The heat can be dangerous to them, and so you've got other dogs got other physical, like facial features, that keep them from doing certain types of activities. And so their bone structures. We used to have Basset hounds, and the Basset hounds, their leg bones would be kind of set upon each other like that, the knee joints. And we were told to be real careful when those dogs are coming off of stairs or trying to jump off of something, because they can hurt their legs, and they can sprain them, and because of the way their bones are set. And so, again, those dogs were bred. They had bred these dogs down to create a certain type of dog. And so Basset hounds are considered large breed dogs, even though they're really short to the ground. And usually about maybe a foot off the ground is about as tall as they are. And so, but great dogs, by the way. But at any rate, let's get into hybrids, guys. And again, you look at this chart here. If you'll remember, this is the taxonomy chart created by Carolus Linnaeus, and you got kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, and genus, and then you got species. Species would be that last one where you see specific epithet, and but that's where you've got species right below genus there. And this is sometimes you'll see others added to this, but if you notice there, I've got in the red box there Canis. Canis, this is your dog kind. Your dog kind. Now, again, where would kind be at? I believe the kind would fall when you think of the animals, and where would we consider a kind? Personally, me, I say it's in the family. And the family is where you're going to see the kinds of animals. And so now that where it says Canidae, just think of dog kind. And so now you got familiaris, and then you got lupus. So let's just say you got the wolf and you got the domesticated dog. Now both of those animals can come together and reproduce offspring. Now what they consider those is hybrids. They consider those hybrid animals, even though they're the same kind of animal. And so now, right there in species, I got a question mark. It says evolutionary biologists have defined species as not being able to breed with other species. It was thought to be a rare and damaging to the animal. Hybridization of species challenges that theory and has turned the concept of species upside down. Okay, if you see that little note there at the bottom, when it comes to having problems, once you get what's called outbreeding depression, you got in mammals, it's the males that are usually having the problems. They cannot be able to, they're not fertile. They can't reproduce. And in birds, some females will have issues. And so not all of them, just some of them, just some, in some instances, the males and mammals, and then with birds, it's the females. Those are usually the ones that are going to be infertile if there are any hybridization issues. And so, again, it's called outbreeding depression. Outbreeding depression. Now, DNA analysis has given scientists a chance to test a variety of wild animals and have discovered that hybridization seems to occur all of the time in the world. And you can see my DNA model right there. That's my DNA model. That's about, I got it right beside of me here. I'm looking at it. It's about 2 feet tall. 2 feet tall, maybe just a hair taller than that. And so that took me a long time to build. I had to paint each one of those balls. Took several coats before I got it. But someday, whenever I get into the microscopic world, I'll show you that. And but that's my DNA model. All right, let's talk about hybridization. DNA sequence evidence points to significant past interbreeding between wild populations of Gravy's zebras and Somali wild asses. Of course, the chromosomal reshuffling and corruption of genetic information can often leave some equus hybrids unable to bear offspring themselves. In horse donkey mule hybridizations, for instance, matched chromosomes from the male and female cannot all perfectly align to create fertile offspring. Nevertheless, rare instances of female mules giving birth have been documented. So you got that Gravy's zebra, and you got the name of it, for taxonomy. You got the genus, which is Equus, and species, which is Grevy or Grevii, and what you got together is Equus Grevy. Now, the Grevy zebra is the most common name for the largest species of zebra. Let's talk about a zedonk, which is a female zebra and a male donkey coming together. Female zebra and a male donkey. If the parents were reversed, it would be called a zonkey. Any zebra combination with another horse species, including zorses, zoni, and zeb mules, is called a zebroid. And there's your picture right there of that. By artificial selection, there are over 350 unique breeds of horses. But you know what, guys? They're all the same kind of animal. So that'll give you this idea here. So Noah didn't have to bring two of every sort of these animals on the ark. He just had to bring two of the horse kind, just two. So that shows you just how many animals he did not have to bring. All right, let's talk about the Yakutian. Horses adapt to different environments easily. American feral horses, often referred to as Mustangs, developed harder hooves compared to domesticated horse breeds, allowing them to travel across rocky or uneven terrain. Also, Yakutian horses have adapted to live in the frigid land of Siberia. These horses have thick coats and short, stocky bodies to conserve heat. When temperatures get very cold, they may go into a state or torpor like hibernation, but without sleep. They adjust their metabolism, lower their body temperature, and slow their heart rate. They are also bred for meat and considered delicious and healthy, reducing the risk of coronary heart disease, diabetes, and hypertension. That is an absolute amazing thing that those horses can do. Now, they have a 5-inch fur and dense undercoat, which protects against temperatures below minus 94 degrees. That is amazing. That is absolutely amazing. Now, at the withers, they are 4.5 feet tall. 4.5 feet tall. That's amazing. Little horse. Now, this is really something else here. It's called a geep. A geep. It's a sheep and a goat. But get this, guys. The sheep has 54 chromosomes and a goat has 60 chromosomes. But they can come together and they can reproduce. They're the same kind of animal. That is a really amazing. All right, let's look at another one. Coy wolves. When hunting drastically cut the wolf population in southern Ontario, which is in Canada, and deforestation reduced their territory, they began to interbreed with both domestic dogs, mostly larger breeds, which makes sense, and coyotes. The result, called a coy wolf or the eastern coyote, is genetically 1/10 dog, 1/4 wolf, and the rest being coyote. The hybrid is twice the size of a coyote. Get that. Here's one. How about a liger, which is a male lion and a female tiger when they reproduce? Ligers are believed to be the largest cats in the world. This is Hercules, 922 pounds. When all fours, Hercules stands a little shy of 6 feet tall. Guys, I mean, that now I'm 5'7". I'm 5'7", so I'm sure that cat could, on all fours, could look at me straight in the eyes. That is scary. Now, as as it's sitting right there, it's 11 feet tall. 11 feet tall, guys. Look at it compared to that guy. Here's some other hybrids. A pizzly, which is a polar bear and a grizzly bear. A wolfen, which is a bottlenose dolphin and a false killer whale. A zoe, which is a male hybrid of a yak and domestic cow. Females are called zomos. Zoes are infertile, but zomos are fertile. Their young are called yak cows. Alaskan brown bears have polar bear DNA in every cell. Get that. Camels and llamas live on other continents and inhabit different environments. They can reproduce, and the offspring is called a kama. They are not only different species, but are listed as different genera, plural form of genus. All right, well, now when talking about the different kinds that were on the ark, Answers in Genesis really had a fascinating article back in 2016 called Reimagining Ark Animals. Reimagining Ark Animals. And this right here is what they believe the original cat kind could have looked like. And so they said at least 38 living shown here and 36 extinct cats descended from this original pair. And so they're from what they're proposing is that that there were no lions or tigers on the ark, and that the original all the cats came from this one cat here. And so again, thinking about the same way with the dogs. Look at all these domestic dogs, guys. Now all these dogs came from the original pair that came off the ark. And so now when we're talking about natural selection, we have Shih Tzu dogs, and so this is Finn here. He's actually standing next to a Coronation evaporated milk can, and so that's him. That's how tall he was. And they put a match, a cigarette lighter, up on top of that, and he was just a little bit taller than that. He was considered a runt, but these dogs are really amazing. But they do have their problems and their issues. And so now we have two of them. We have a male and a female. All right, let's look at some notes on Shih Tzus. Pronounced in the West Shih Tzu or Shih Tzu, the Chinese say Scherzer. The name means lion or lion dog. Imperial breeders in the palace of the Chinese emperor developed the Shih Tzu centuries ago from Tibetan breeding stock. The breed is most likely the product of crosses of two even older Sino-Tibetan breeds, the Lhasa and the Pekingese. The breed remained hidden behind palace walls, virtually unknown to the outside world until the 1930s, and they were admitted in the AKC stud book in 1969. And so, because of their heavy coats and short faces, Shih Tzus do not tolerate heat well and are not good swimmers. Although most Shih Tzus are generally healthy, as in all breeds, there may be some health issues, such as hip dysplasia, patellar luxation, which is a slipped kneecap, and eye disease. Corneal dryness and inflammation from excess exposure to air because of improperly closed eyelids occurs in the breed. Cataracts, juvenile cataracts, progressive retinal atrophy, and retinal detachment are other eye conditions that occur. And so, again, if you was to take all the dogs and throw them into the wilderness, natural selection is a real thing, guys. And most likely, the Shih Tzus would not last long. I doubt very seriously they'd last a year out in the wild. And you'd probably end up getting a dog that would be much like a coyote or a wolf in the end. And so, it's just, again, natural selection is going to work over on these dogs, and you're going to end up having something that's much stronger, much more robust in the end that can take the heat, the cold, and the other things that nature throws at it. But that is it as far as hybrids. And so now, when we come back, we are going to look at the actual loading of the animals on the ark. And so we're going to look at that next. And so I hope you guys have learned something. I'm not an expert on all this, guys. I mean, I can't even pronounce the words correctly. But the Bible is correct, and that I do know. And so whenever you get these arguments about these folks are saying, well, they can't take two of all, tell them you're right. You're exactly right, but that's not what the Bible says. The Bible says kinds, and that shortens up drastically the amount of animals that you're going to have to put on that ark. And so, but when we come back, guys, we're going to start loading these babies up. We're going to talk about that. You guys take care. Love you. Bye-bye.